Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. This is episode 54, and we are talking about the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. And Martha's going to be on the show in the spring, so watch for that episode. Next week, Adrian Tchaikovsky will be on the show, so definitely join us for that one. We have a fantastic conversation, and Children of Memory just came out in Canada. You'll hear about that. All right, let's make our way over to the bridge.
I've got some science fact for us, and this is kind of a two-part thing, but it started from reading a short story that I got to thinking about whole brain uploading into simulations on computers, which of course isn't something that we can do right now. However, there are some interesting futurists out there, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard of them, by the name of Ray Kurzweil and Nick Bostrom, who like to fancy themselves having the ability to predict the future. And of course, neither of them really do, but they get paid a lot of money to do so. But Ray Kurzweil, who is ever the optimist around prolonging life and AI and all these different things, has suggested that full brain neural simulation, where we upload our brains into a computer, is something that could be feasible by the end of the 2020s and into the 2030s, using supercomputers, which is pretty darn close, right? Like, here we are in 2022. That means that if Ray is right, which he probably isn't, in 8 to 10 years, we might have whole brain uploading. And I was reading that as I was reading another short story, and I started thinking to myself, this is kind of scary. What are the implications of whole brain uploading? What do you guys think about this idea about uploading ourselves into a computer?
I don't think it's going to happen.
That's pretty
for
crazy.
Maybe hundreds of years. I think it's way optimistic and crazy. But it's a classic sci-fi trope to think about. And this story that you brought to us, Lena, by Quantum, QNTM, totally changed my perspective for sure. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Kurzweil, I'm not familiar. I've heard the name. What is he? What does he do?
He's an overly optimistic futurist. He has this idea that the people that are living right now are going to live to be 200 years old. He thinks that there's going to be biological advancements in the prolonging human life, and he thinks he's going to live to be 150. He's the guy who spoke to William Shatner and got him thinking that he was going to live until he was, in his hundreds. And of course, we're not there. We don't have the technology, but that he's showing these exponential curves of technology, and he's also following those same exponential curves of computational capability and simulation of, like, ants' brains and things like that, and extrapolating that to the complexity of human cognition. But so he's come up with predictions, and he's one of the few people who are willing to stick dates on predictions around new technologies, which means he's going to be wrong frequently. So anyway, I thought it was he's a futurist, basically.
He's the singularity guy.
So he's not a computer programmer.
Yeah, he's a singularity guy. That's right. He's talked about the idea of AI becoming sentient, and is that right? Is that, Marty? Is that the one that you're talking about? The singularity?
I think
so.
Yeah, that, like, basically the pace of technological change at some point sort of goes vertical or something, or gets out of control, and it's faster than any single human could ever keep up with, and so it's sort of taken over by AIs and artificial intelligence, and then, like, sort of the invention of technology is suddenly then going to not really depend on humans anymore. It's going to be our technologies inventing new technologies, and so it runs away. It's the singularity, they call it, where basically humans aren't in control anymore. It's the AIs and stuff that sort of take over the pace of human civilization. I don't buy it, but I like that he takes a lot of vitamins. I saw a documentary with him, and he's got, like, this organizer of, like, 52 vitamins that he pops every day, and he's just like, this is like taking over my life. I take vitamins all the time, taking every kind of possible thing I could possibly take, and it's like 4 times a day, and I take 12 pills at a time. I was like, yeah, that's what that looks like.
Yeah, it seems like he's got a bit of he seems optimistic, right? I mean, it seems hopeful, but But let's say it happens. Let's say you can get it uploaded and we sort of get there. I'm curious to see what the psychological impact would be on those first people who are uploaded. Like, what is life without taste or touch? Or how do you see? How do we as humans undergo a transition that profound? Because I don't know that we've really thought it through. What does it feel like? And I wonder. There's no sex, right? Like, not in a good way, I would think. And so I just imagine, people going nuts, and then having these uploaded humans going slowly or maybe very quickly, becoming mentally ill and begging to be deleted, right? Like, I just I could see it going horribly wrong. You would have to condition yourself to a whole different lifestyle. Like the first people going in would almost be like astronauts. They would have to go in and report back everything that is terrible about that experience, because I'm sure there's plenty of terrible things we're not considering, and then try to adapt people. Like, if you don't, and I think it's its own evolutionary process that we would have to go through in order to do it successfully, if it was possible. And I think it would be probably even deadlier than the space program, right? And at first.
There's huge scientific or science fiction tropes, as Marty was saying, related to this, two of which I think make this, I think, a non-starter in terms of something I would even consider. The first one is you're completely at the mercy of the simulation that you're put into. So whomever is pulling the levers on that simulation is your god. So if you are an entity that is uploaded into that simulation, you are completely beholden to them, whether they want to inflict pain upon you, whether they want you to only be seeing the color green for the rest of your life. Like they could do anything to manipulate you. They could also adjust the pace of your perception. So you could spend, subjective thousands of years in an objective short period of time. Like in 5 years, they could ramp up, in 5 minutes, they could ramp you up to be experiencing 100 years, right? You wouldn't have control over your perception of time. So you could be sitting in a dark room for 100 years, which would make you go insane, right? But the thing and I have heard this before in science fiction stories before, what I had never heard about before was until I read this short story called Lena by QNTM Quantum, as you're talking about, Marty, is the idea of slavery of uploaded mindsets and just how dangerous that could possibly be. Like, just think about today. We download a piece of software, we use that software, we share that software with other people maybe, we modify it if it's open source software, we use it for our own purposes, our commercial purposes, our fun purposes, personal life. What if we had an entity that we could use for just about anything? To answer calls at a call center, or to do scientific experiments on. And if they start to get surly and annoying, you just reboot them back to their initial state, so that, the moment that their brain was uploaded, the wonder and the excitement, oh, what am I going to wake up into in the simulation? You could re-wake them up time after time after time. And this dystopian story that was set out by Quantum, QNTM, totally changed my mind about whole brain uploading. It's not something I would ever do. And it's funny because Nick Bostrom talks a lot about this, and he talks about this as a path to superintelligence, the way of getting to the singularity as described by Ray Kurzweil. And that is a real dystopian future because of the manipulation of people, of what they could do with these simulations in terms of simply uploading their consciousness and letting it go free and allowing people to access it and torture this poor folk, right? I forgot about the human condition when I was thinking about whole brain uploading until I read this short story.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Yeah, I was blown away by this short story. I too thought there were utopian sort of versions of this that, well, first of all, my utopian vision of whole brain uploading was cut short by the very simple idea and acceptance of the fact that there will be no continuity, right? It's not that you will be uploaded and you will wake up in a simulation. You'll still be you, or you'll still be dead, or whatever it is. It's just there's a copy that will exist that you have no subjective continuity with, but there will be, if you upload your brain, there will be a copy of you that will wake up in the simulation. So it does me no good to do that, presumably. But also, there is this danger of, putting a copy of yourself into mental slavery, where, this piece of software, right, will be used like software. We all have all these stories in our head, or at least I do, of all these things that like, oh, we build this amazing computer where there's an afterlife and we put people up there and we upload ourselves and we'll have souls and an afterlife and da-da-da-da-da. And somebody's going to pay for that huge network of extremely expensive computers to allow a piece of software to run around believing that it's sentient and having a great time and chasing enlightenment. No, we don't do that, right? We have computers that we pay for to do jobs. And so all software has a job. And so uploaded brains will have jobs, and they will most likely, there is this future, right, without rights, possibly, unless we endow human rights to these things. And then how do you control that? But, they'll be used the way we use AI right now. They'll be used to drive cars or really boring, repetitive tasks that human brains are still better at than AI. And so, and then, all these dystopian things in the story are they're just so well executed. It's just so subtle. He just gives names to things like, I ran the blue conditioning protocol, which works, it gives a lifespan to this uploaded human brain slightly longer than the red conditioning protocol. And that's all he says, but then you realize, red conditioning is pain, blue conditioning is pleasure, and they just run this on a fast forward, right? You just run the executable routine that takes you 5 microseconds, but puts this presumably subjectively aware entity through 5 years of torture in order to tell them that, this is your job. You got to drive this car or check out these groceries, 8 hours a day or 15 hours a day for 100 years until you go, you lose your mind and you go loopy and we just delete you and start again. And it's pretty horrific, right? Like the notion of putting subjectively aware entities to work for us inside computers.
Or even how they dispassionately talk about the demeanor of the upload. This one has a particularly affable demeanor, so we can utilize them for these purposes. They haven't figured out the context within which they're in the simulation, so they're still willing to help. Right? It is how evil is that?
And then later uploads, after like it's culturally become integrated into the world, that there are such this thing he calls it work loading, which is just so benign and grim, right? Like, we just put these mental states to work, by the millions or billions even, right? In multiple parallel copies all over the world. And anyway, so brains that were uploaded later, after this whole phenomenon became known, wake up in a panic because they realize they've been enslaved. It's like waking up on a slave ship. Like, holy shit! Oh no! Oh God, you got me! You've uploaded my brain into a job that I'm going to have to do for like 50 years. And they've read all these stories of horrific, experiences of subneighbors, right, that the first upload didn't have. The first upload was like, oh, wow, this is great. Let's do research. It's a great story. You guys got to read this. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, if anybody does want to read it,
so again,
it's on qntm.org, and you search for the short story called Lena. It's a really good short read.
I want to read the first sentence. I mean, the other thing I love about this, just because, so if you all listened to our latest episode, which was the interview with Damien Walter, he talked about quantum as sort of a really modern new writer, and we sort of discussed the fact that he's so, it's like, it's like reading fiction for people who have grown up on the internet in intensely dense information scapes. And so his fiction reads like a technical manual, and that's kind of the funny part. He writes it like or at least this story, he writes like a technical manual for this piece of software, as if you just like, you're like, you've got a routine that you're running, and and you just read the README file, right? So the story starts. M. Acevedo, mnemonic map Acevedo, also known as Miguel, is the earliest executable image of a human brain. It is a snapshot of the living brain of neurology graduate Miguel Acevedo Alvarez, 2010 to 2073, taken by researchers at the Uplift Laboratory at the University of New Mexico on August 1st, 2031. Though this was not the first successful snapshot taken of the living state of a human brain, it was the first to be captured with sufficient fidelity that it could be run in simulation on computer hardware without succumbing to cascading errors and rapidly crashing. Anyway, that goes on, and there's like chapters or characteristics or sections, motivation, workloads, end states, reactions, and legacy. Yeah, it's like reading a technical document about a future software object, and it's great. It's like a 10-minute read max.
Yeah, Quantum is really neat because he's very iterative with his writing. He releases early and often, so he'll release an unfinished story, and he'll get comments about it, and then he'll iterate on it. He'll change it, even to the point of changing the title. Like this was actually titled something different a little while ago, and he's changed the title of it. So he's very transparent with his writing process.
So he seems to kind of encompass the definition of science fiction in just his work alone, from what I can tell. Like the style of his writing, even the way that he's writing itself, it seems to be this new... I don't know, is he taking writing itself into the future?
Yeah, the process is different, It's not very much about having a finished product and publishing it. He's making it more open source. Here's what I got. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And then going from there.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, so his most famous book, anyway, it's called There Is No Anti-Mimetic Division. So this is something Damian Walter's been hyping for a while, and I've started reading it, and it's dense, right? It's pretty intense, and it reads a bit like this technical manual too. So it's a different style. It's not cyberpunk. It's like info punk, or I don't know, web info.
I
don't know what to call it.
I like infopunk. I like that. I think that's great. Yeah.
Infopunk.
Well done, Marty. Good work.
Marty.
Good work.
Thank you.
Good job, Marty.
Good.
May or may not use that. We'll do it.
Well, I want to say more about brain uploading. There is a long history of intelligent humans and reflection upon the human condition and the body and the brain and the mind as as whatever the dominant new technology of the day is, right? During Descartes' time, the steam engine, right? It was the Industrial Revolution. The steam engine was everything, right? They were making machines that move and do things that looked like how the body does things. And so it was thought that muscles and, skeletons, all that we were basically a steam engine, right? We were like this clockwork object with the boom, boom, like some motive force that pushes all the pistons and it moves us around. And so people thought the human body at first was a steam engine, right? And then the mind and the brain must work like a steam engine. And then computers came along, and the next big technological metaphor for everything in our day is a computer. And so we think of the brain as being like a computer. It has states, and it goes from state to state, and it calculates this from that, and but that's a metaphor. And like when you take that analogy literally, it doesn't take long for it to break down. The brain is not a computer. I think all the people that think that we're making AI or we're going to make a self-sentient object inside software, I just think they're totally wrong. I just don't think the brain is a computer. I think it's just a metaphor we've taken too far.
But that's not what simulation says. Simulation is about creating the biological equivalent inside of a computer. So it's not saying that the brain is a computer. It's kind of flipping that, right? Where the computer can become a biological system for that entity to live within.
So the idea there is that, you map all the actions in a brain. So we have a bunch of neurons represented in software, and then all the neurons do the things that we think neurons do, and they release action potentials and chemicals and gates, and we wire it all up. And when we do that, when we imitate in software what happens physically as far as we can measure or know in the brain, suddenly that will be a brain. that's exactly, I think, wrong too. Like, I think that's just so idiotic.
Because you think that there's
right?
stuff we don't know. We can't possibly know enough about our brain and about consciousness to be able to simulate it. Is that why?
I think so, yeah. Like, there is always going to be a choosing of what to represent. And so, we bring our model of what we think the brain is doing into this software imitation of what the brain is doing. And you can write that software as big as you want and all of that, but I just don't think it's going to be a brain. It's just going to be our current picture of what we think is happening in a brain, and you'll represent some bits of data. And it's not going to be a brain. It's not going to be conscious. It's not going to come aware. It's not really going to do what a brain does. Because, I just think maybe this is like an inverse mystic thing, but I do think that consciousness and awareness and what a brain does is fundamentally linked to what a brain is. Like, it's biology. It's biological. It is a squishy, like, there's this sort of belief that you can make an equivalent of anything that happens in the brain in silicon, that it's just states and all of that. And I think, I just disagree with that. I really do think consciousness kind of lives, it's a physical phenomenon that
I think it's a really hard
enacted in our
problem.
brain.
It's a really hard problem, but to say that we can't do it is just like saying we can't fly to the moon, right? It is a really hard problem that we cannot solve today, and our knowledge of our brain and consciousness is simply inadequate. Like, we couldn't even model it. Like, we don't even know where a lot of what goes on inside of the brain in terms of where consciousness is. Is it a quantum thing, right? Can we simulate all those quantum phenomena? Certainly not in the near future. Definitely, that's why I was saying Ray Kurzweil's estimations that maybe in the 2030s we might be able to do this is just wildly out to lunch. But again, it is an epistemological problem. We have this disconnect from what the actual brain is. But if we can get closer to that, for sure, it's theoretically possible. We could simulate it.
Well, okay. I'm saying, yeah, maybe in the future. But I just think, we don't even have the language yet. We don't understand the hard problem of consciousness. We don't really understand much about the brain. Like, my image is always that, like, some Neanderthal discovers a computer and he opens it up and, and the computer's on and there's a screen and there's a movie playing, right? So he opens up the computer and he takes a stick and he jams it into the circuit board and the movie stops. Oh, now we understand. That must be consciousness. Consciousness lives in the thing that I poked. Right? No, it doesn't. Not at all. Like, you don't have the first idea, of what's going on in that computer. But that's sort of what we're doing to the brain. We're like poking and prodding, and we know how to, this turns this on, this turns that off. But we don't have the philosophy, we don't have the epistemology, the metaphysics, we don't have an idea, really, of what consciousness is. It's all, I just think it's a mess, and people are just way too optimistic about it. And actually, so what you brought up, the going to the moon. So what if we wrote a simulation of everything that happened in the Apollo program and all the bits and pieces and stuff that humans did and running around and technology was made, and we made a simulation of that in a computer? Would that be going to the moon? No, it'd just be a movie. It'd just be a simulation. It's utterly dissociated from the actual fact of going to the moon. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, to have an instantiation of a self-aware being, that's a thing that happens in the world. You can simulate it all you want, but it's not going to be that thing. It's as different as just making a simulation of going to the moon as going to the moon is. It's
that's
that.
True. And that's a different discussion. I would agree with that. For sure. I hate to bring up the idea of, but what if we're in a simulation and right now, all this is simulated, and then that point of when we went to the moon, in the 1970s and 60s, was all simulated.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that's a fact.
We have no evidence for that.
It's a cool idea, but
it is science fiction, very much, and I agree with that. I 100% agree that it is science fiction.
Yeah.
But it's possible.
But that's exactly why we have to find out, right? And that's it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
We'll find out the answers to all of these things. Well, actually, the simulation one, never.
Probably. Unless our gods pull a lever and talk to us.
So this month it was a little different. We decided to do the Murderbot Diaries. And they're small novellas for the most part. And so, and the story is, it plays on the same themes a lot of the time. So we thought, well, you just pick whatever ones you want, read as far as you want. I've read them all. I really did enjoy them. They're a great sort of. It's kind of a beach read with a sneaky level of depth to it, and the author Martha Wells has won the Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Awards. It was also a New York Times and USA Today bestseller within these series, and I really loved them. Kind of and at first glance, I mean, it sort of feels like a friendly Terminator movie. Murderbot is android AI that sort of that's working as a security guard. It sort of frees itself from its restrictive programming and becomes the hero of these books. Murderbot is a name that it gives to itself. It's an AI super soldier in a sense. It serves as a demonstration, I think, of how AI actually probably would look and how bloody scary it could be in the wrong personality or the wrong artificial intelligence. The way she writes, the multiple processes that are simultaneously happening and that are possible for an AI to maintain at the same time with the same focus that we as humans could only devote to one process at a time. So as you're reading the book, from the perspective of Murderbot, it's going through the 15 different things it's doing at once. And she does it, and that's really hard to do. It's not like the Terminator, who's like a single focus robot. I'm here for one task, and that's it. And only really does one task. I mean, when you take it into context, Terminator acts a lot like a human, but is kind of indestructible and uncaring. And that's what makes it sort of scary and villainous. But what's really sort of what doesn't happen there, what happens in these books is this idea that this super soldier could be doing 15 different things, hacking computers, flying drones, and thinking about 10 things at once. And that's really the power of an AI soldier, is the fact that it can manage all of that data load, and there's no way. You have a force multiplier in a pretty serious way here. And then the other aspects of the books that Martha touches on is sort of idea of the corporate occupation of space and what the future of slave labor might look like in a populated galaxy, and where there's little to no state involvement. Right, your state or is essentially a corporation. You're living and working under the same entity. And as we see billionaires move their companies into space and eventually beyond the reach of their home governments, you can assume the first department they're going to cut is going to be the HR department. And so I think we can, it kind of demonstrates just, how awful worker conditions would be in that kind of future, and how likely it probably is going to work out in that way. You can imagine some company in a far-flung galaxy doing whatever the hell it wants, really, because it's got no one to answer to but profits. But anyways, it's the Murderbot is the protagonist AI, and it's just got great lines. There's good dialogue. There's websites devoted to Murderbot quotes, which are pretty funny. Martha Wells was sort of on a downward career trajectory when she started this series. She'd written a fantasy novel in the 90s that had really kicked off, and she got her start back into sci-fi through, I think she did like a Star Wars book and a couple other things, and it sort of got her back in. And then Murderbot really just took off for her and reinvigorated her career. And so there's a nice story behind it. It's a lot of fun, and if you need a break from something really serious, I recommend highly just taking a dip into the Murderbot series. You'll not be sorry for it. But that's my opinion. We all knew I was going to rave about this one. How did you guys like it?
I can say I had already read this entire series. I remember reading the first one because it showed up as a recommendation for me. And at first I didn't quite know what to make of it. But then almost instantly I was hooked into the first novella. And it was partially because it's really good action, like you said. Also great characters. The characters are identifiable to a certain extent. In particular, the Murderbot itself it's almost like, for those who have inclinations towards introversion, I would almost feel like this is a call to arms, or where the introverts can pump their fist in the air and say, yeah, you go get him, you Murderbot who likes to hide in corners and watch content. You can almost imagine this Murderbot streaming through Netflix shows just to kind of hide themselves from the rest of society. And in as much as any of us have those types of tendencies, I think that's relatable to some people. And I think that's part of the reason why this series has struck a chord with a lot of people is there are a lot of people who kind of like to hide and watch their content or read their content as a mechanism for relaxing, and so that element of it, I think, is identifiable. And then she wrote her novel, Network Effect, right? Martha Wells did. And then it went and won the Hugo in 2021, which totally surprised me. I had read it. I thought it was a good book. I didn't think it was going to win the Hugo. And then it won. And uniformly, all of these books have got these amazing Goodreads ratings. In particular, Network Effects is like a 4.6. So obviously it's striking a chord with a lot of people. So because you've assigned this to us, Sam, I went back and I listened to 2 more of the novellas as audiobooks. And I listened to Artificial Condition, which is the second one in the series. And I really liked that. There were actually a couple points there that made me a little weepy. And I don't get super weepy a lot in a lot of different books. And in particular, it was when the transport ship Art did something, I can't even remember what it was now, but it was something that was just thoughtful towards Murderbot. And it was such a minor thing, and it was so endearing that it made me a little bit weepy. This poor Murderbot, and this other entity is being nice to it. It was so nerdy, but it was such an awesome scene, and I thought these are the types of poignant scenes that she intersperses just enough to make you say, oh yeah, there's some good emotion here, in addition to all the fighting and the intrigue and the mystery, because there was a lot of mystery in that. It was a crime book. It was a detective whodunit. So I really liked that one as well. I also listened to Fugitive Telemetry. So I'm pro Murderbot. I like the series.
So I too read All Systems Red back in the day. I think it won a Nebula. It was in one of my Nebula, best of collections, and I'd heard about it from friends who were all like, "Yeah, Murderbot's so great," and I liked All Systems Red. Like, it was worth reading, but I found it like a less entertaining version or a less hilarious version of Marvin the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's like it's got that sardonic, sarcastic, sort of, pathetic inner monologue voice, but not enough that it ever made me laugh. And I guess I've said that recently about the minds in Ian M. Banks too, and it does remind me of Ian M. Banks's minds in AIs, right? They're these sort of sardonic, self-deprecating kind of AIs, and that was good. But then I skipped all the rest of them for the assignment this month, and I probably should have read the other novellas in the order that they came out, but I skipped right to Network Effect, and I tried listening to it twice on a audiobook. I turned it off after 2 chapters the first time, and then I turned it off after 5 chapters this time, and I just accepted that this is going to be a DNR for me, or DNF, did not finish. Partly because it just, again, I didn't get to the emotional arc part of it. I didn't get to the parts that you're talking about, Kevin, where there was, significant internal development. Or some change in the character. I felt like I went from the very first novella to the last book, and it was exactly the same character, doing exactly the same things, using the same tone of voice, and it was 5 chapters of I shot him, and then I grabbed his wrist and I crushed it, and then I moved around and I got my drones to shoot them, and then I went to the back and I did this and I did that, and it was so plot heavy and not enough, character and internal world for me. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I believe you guys that in the other parts of this that I did not read, I hope that is happening. But having at least done the sequence that I did, I just couldn't get into it at all. I felt like it was a very flat, certainly network effect, was just, it reminded me of what Damian Walter was saying about the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, right? That the characters were just on rails, and they start here, and then they just sort of move them through the plot, and then they end there, and nothing really changed inside. And I kind of just felt like that's kind of what my experience was of Murderbot. It was, it's the particular character of being sardonic and sarcastic and kind of, self-deprecating and kind of mean. That's a great place to start, but you can't stay there too long. And, for me, it's just every part I got exposed to after the first one was just still there. And I was a little bored by that. So I stopped reading.
No, it's hard to disagree with anything you said. I didn't mind it as much. I think
that's usually the case with our opinions here. I will also say one thing, to warn people not to do what I did and just jump straight to Network Effect, because the other thing that bothered me in Network Effect is, like, right from the beginning, she's referencing every other novella and what happened in those novellas all the time. Like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, referencing different parts of the story arc from before. And by the time, it was art, right? I always realized, okay, there must be an entire novella that's based around this other ship named Art that now we're talking about. And I'm just like, I don't care, because I didn't read that one, man. So you probably have to read them all before you get to Network Effect. That would be my other recommendation.
I don't know if this has ever happened before, but Marty, I think I'm more in line with how you're feeling about this book.
We have a new split,
or at least the series. New split, but it's quite possible that it's because of what you just described, Marty. So I jumped in on Exit Strategy, and I was told that these are all stories you can kind of jump in on. The novellas, there's not an ongoing story, and if there isn't, then, well, I guess I don't know if I was just misled or what, but I found it very convoluted. The first 30 to 40 pages was just me going, what? Like, who's this? Who's that? Like, okay. Like, it was just like full throttle plot, and I got buried in it, which was fine because I caught up with it and was like, okay, I'm here. We got this person running away. We're trying to find this person and save this person. So it was very small plot in the end, but it did feel like a lot of information for the first couple of chapters, 3 chapters for sure. So I don't know if that was the best way. Don't just jump in on Exit Strategy again. Just like Marty said, don't jump in on Network Effect, which is the one I was thinking about going, because that's I was thinking about doing, because that's the novel. That is a full novel, right? Network Effect. Yeah, but at the same time, I do like the main character. I think he's great. I do like how he's the kind of funny human-like character that I'd like to follow for through these stories. And great description, Sam, by really pointing out that the Terminator has one goal. And yeah, sure, they can, like, you see their vision sometimes. They're like, car here, person with weapon there, clothes that fit over here, and they can compute all this information. Murderbot definitely has a lot going on in its brain, and you get that through the narrative. So it can be convoluted at times as you're reading, to be like, oh my god, he's jumping over here, and that's a part of the character, which is great. So I do think that I could see why people love these stories, but I also like the way that it ended. Exit Strategy, because he you find out he's going on a new adventure. There's new opportunities for him, and I thought that was exciting. It kind of made me want to be like, okay, I'll jump into the next one, because he's going on it's going on another adventure with some main characters. So it was a little bit like, okay, I see why this is like, okay, where are you going next, and this could be fun. So, I'm not gonna grab any of those books right away, and I want a little bit more magic in my stories. However, I like boring banks, which is contradictory to Sam and Marty here too. It's funny how we've kind of moved around. Yeah. We've changed or swapped positions with this one a little bit. Also worth mentioning, Martha is coming on the show in the spring, so anyone that wants to hear us chat with Martha, she's coming on in the spring, so we'll be chatting with her, and we'll have Murderbot questions.
Yeah, she got her start in fantasy. Her book in the 90s was Fall of Ilren, and was a sort of quiet hit. And it was her move into sci-fi that sort of got into Murderbot, in the Murderbot series, that sort of revived her career, and that maybe she's sort of going back to home territory. You were talking about the Marvin robot. The Murderbot for me, just to circle back on that, reminded me of K2SO from Rogue One, which is the hacked Imperial droid. And
Alan Tudyk had voiced that android, I believe.
But I also had the experience when I first read the first Murderbot story I read was actually one of the novellas, and I didn't think that much of it either. It was like the third book or something. And then we came out of, I forget what book we had read. It was a couple books ago. It was pretty dark, and I was like, I need something kind of light and like I need a beach read, you know. And so I started from the beginning, and I think that's what got me hooked. Was I would read it, and easy read, fun, and then we would do a book of the month, and I get kind of get serious about it, but I could always jump back to it.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get into the series, I think the development of the character, where you actually feel for Sec Unit or the Murderbot, is in all systems read, the first one, and then through Artificial Condition, the second one. It's at that point, after that second book, that you feel a rapport for this character, and you've seen the subtleties of the change, because there is a change in the character. In particular, it's in those two books where it becomes the Sec Unit, the character that people talk to and talk about and don't feel like it's going to kill them all the time.
And it's an it. No. I got to call you out on that, Tristan. I don't think it's a him. Through the entire...
No, I did that a couple times. It's definitely an it. Yeah.
Did anybody else gender the Murderbot?
Well, I was paying attention to it and realized that, like, in my head, it was more female.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was thinking female. Me too.
Really?
Yeah. That's why I mentioned it. Is I kept thinking there's no gender here whatsoever, and for some reason I keep thinking of this as a female, and I don't know why. It's a big brute Terminator of a thing, but I'm still thinking female.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm really excited because I've been looking forward to my book selection and selecting this book, at least from, or a book from this author, for a really long time. But it's never really fit. It's never been appropriate. So I'm going to do it, and it's time to go epic space opera, people. We haven't had an epic space opera in a while, and when I mean epic, this is like as epic as you get, I think, around space opera authors.
Oh, so
you do, don't you?
Oh my God! What could this possibly be?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Marty knows.
So hold on
Marty
here.
knows.
Hold on. The most epic author?
No, the most epic
Space
space opera author, I would say. This is my subjective interpretation of what this definition means, but he's among the I said he. This person is among the most epic of them, I would say. Anyway, okay. The author is Peter F. Hamilton, and so this gentleman has written. He's a prolific author. He's written many different series. He's known specifically for books from the Commonwealth saga, which I think there are a dozen books, maybe even more in that area, in that world. And I'm not going to pick a book from the Commonwealth saga, although I highly recommend that series for anybody who has not read any Peter F. Hamilton. The main reason why I'm not choosing any books from that series is because they're all so long. They're huge, and I don't know that we've got the time to get through it in 1 month. He has a shorter series, slightly shorter. They're still longish, but I think they're worth it. And I've finished this series, and it is definitely one of my favorites, space opera series. So I highly recommend the whole series. We're only going to do the first book. We're going to be reading Salvation by Peter F. Hamilton. First in the series. It's a trilogy, and so this one is it's a good book that involves kind of whodunit mystery, solving crime, conspiracy thriller. A lot of character focus in this book as well, so I think it will kind of check boxes for a lot of people in this group. Alien technology, interspecies war, the potential for human decline and the society being destroyed. It is big ideas, big space opera ideas, and I was hooked after I finished this book. So I finished all the series, and they're all done. So we don't have to wait, even though this is his latest series. They're all ready for us to read if anybody wants to continue reading, assuming you like it.
Well, I have read Salvation, the first book, and I loved it. There's multiple storylines, and there's one that I wanted more of, and I believe, Kevin, we talked about this, and you said the second and third book go more into it when they're on the young people are on that other planet.
Yeah, the second and third books are
about?
My favorite, actually. Salvation is not my favorite in this series at all.
Okay.
But we got to start
so
from the beginning.
Look forward to going, exactly, and I'm looking forward to going deeper into this series, but... Kevin, they're not going to like it, just so you know. I'm just making a little prediction here. Sam's going to hate it.
No, I love space operas, though, man.
No, it's really good, but I do think it's going to be a bit on the dry side for the. It's not that fun page-turning adventure, right?
I thought it was a page-turner.
It's
well, here's the
but
deal.
It's heavy. It's got some heavy dry.
I'm gonna download it, and right now it's leaf raking season where we are. And I happen to be Kevin's neighbor. Mm-hmm. And so in the coming weeks, Kevin will know if I hate this book because my leaves will be on Kevin's backyard.
Well, I got a leaf blower, man. I can just blow those right back at you.
Yeah. And if it gets really bad, you might start finding cat shit and dog shit and who knows what else you can end up on your lawn there.
Chucked at my back window.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everything's okay with Sam and Kevin after this book. We'll find out. We'll let you know next month when we get to that book. Episodes once a week from now on. Did you know that? It's happening. Next week, Adrian Tchaikovsky's on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Until next time.